I'm going to welcome everybody into the house. The ones that are out there, come on in. And Pam has let me know that we're online. We're going across the country, and I actually have people from across the country who said, I'm going to join in, so I'm excited. It's for them. Anyway, welcome, everyone. It's so good to see you. I was thinking, well, I've been thinking about this a lot as you have, is, with all the things that are going on around us. And wherever you are in this moment, if you're online or if you're in this house, I want to wish you all a wonderful, wonderful spring. The spring season, let's claim it, let's open it, and let's make it truth for hope. That's our spring this year, springing forward. So I want to welcome you all, and as one of the things that I know Lake Oswego folk do, is they stand up and wave at who's ever online. So you don't have to stand up, but one of the things, welcome anybody who's online with us so that they know that they're included. That's what we do, and that's their fashion. So as you all know, in our tradition, the United Church of Christ, it's no matter who you are or wherever you are in life's journey, you're welcome here. Thank you. My name is Linda Jaramillo, and I'm part of the United Church of Christ Central Pacific Conference Immigrant Welcoming Network. And there's lots of folks from that network in this house. I know I see them all. So anyway, we want to say a special thank you on behalf of the network to Lake Oswego, UCC, for being here and making this sacred space available to us. And when we put out the word about let's have Rhina come, we asked different folk on the network, do you want to, let's have Rhina come. There was Lake Oswego, Carlos, Milwaukee said, we want to. And so here's where we are. And we thank anybody and everybody who has helped get the word out for this evening that we can be together tonight. Now, I want you to know that my real desire would be to have you each introduce yourselves, but I'm not going to do that. Because you'd probably not like me very much for doing that, because we'd be spending our time doing introductions and tonight and tomorrow morning and not get to hear from Rhina and Jenny. So you'll have time after our time together this evening. And we're going to have, thank you again, Lake Oswego, for all the treats that you brought for us tonight. So we'll be able to do social hour, and you'll be able to get to know each other and share names, okay? So I want to say that our welcoming network really felt that we wanted to be in solidarity and support of our immigrant siblings, which is why we decided that we wanted to have the Reverend Rhina Ramos here with us tonight and to share her story. Reverend Rhina comes from Oakland, California. She's going to tell you far more about that than I could ever say, but I have to say this. Her story is, well, let me say about Rhina. She's a local church pastor. She's an associate conference minister, and she's a community activist, and all of that, and a world citizen. But she's a preacher. She's a teacher, she's a prophet, and now she's an author. She's an author. En mi corazón un volcán, in my heart a volcano. And we get to hear that from her directly. And so that's a very special gift for all of us. And I have to say, I'll say this loudly, that we want to give a call out to Rhina's publisher, who is a dear friend of ours and a co-student at Pacific School of Religion, Brenda Vaca, who launched A Riot of Roses publishing house. And when she heard of the book, contacted Rhina and said, we'll publish it in English. And so they did. So we're all beneficiaries of that. As if this wasn't treat enough tonight, I wanted to tell you the big treat as well is that Rhina will be interviewed by Reverend Jenny Ott, who is the pastor of this church. So what we've got today is a real treat of two pastors, two preachers, two community activists, two justice seekers, all of the things that they are together and their powerful presence. And here we have a powerful presence of two United Church of Christ women who have been around and doing the leadership that we've needed to be doing all of the time. And they come from two distinctly different congregations. Very different, and you'll probably hear more about that. But it's a joy that your journeys together have begun, and that we'll be able to follow them in their journey of hope, their journey of love, and their journey of justice. Because as you know, we believe that love has no borders. Correct? Love has no borders. Yeah, so we're very, very happy to have you all here, and worry not, we'll be taking time to answer questions. And then at the closing this evening, our general minister and president, did you hear me almost do that? Our conference minister, Tyler Connolly, will close us in a word of prayer, and we will be actually asking for a contribution. I want to say a special welcome to Karen Rodriguez from the Interfaith Movement for Immigrant Justice. Good to see you. So here we are, and I'm just going to invite the pastors to come forward and share the story.
Well, thank you all again so much for being here tonight. Welcome to the Oswego UCC, and we just want to enjoy this time and conversation together, and most of all hear from you, Rhina. So welcome tonight.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that you're here. So I think we're going to lead off with just you sharing a little bit about why you wrote In My Home
Yes, I'll tell you. I planted the church that I now lead in December of 2011 because there was a need for a Spanish-speaking LGBTQ immigrant welcoming congregation, and if I was to be ordained, that was the church that I was going to lead. So that became my call, and I became ordained to that. But given that I was planting a church, I had to continue working in the nonprofit sector. So until 2018, I was doing my ministry on volunteer basis. And so on 2018, during the first Trump administration, I decided that my best way to serve the immigrant community was to go into full-time ministry. But I knew that nobody was going to pay me to do that. So I had to convince my wife to let me quit my job. And I said, and you have to know, my wife is an atheist. But very supportive person. And I said, this is where I need to be. This is where I'm going to do my best work, because the immigrant community is suffering, the LGBT community is suffering, and this is what I need to be doing. And she said, okay, let's try it out. She's a psychologist with Kaiser and has great health benefits. She said, okay, my insurance will cover you. Let's try it out for a while. And so, in that in-between time, I was doing some consultant work. I was, patching a little bit. But she said to me, okay, she said, you pretty much unemployed, and there's not going to be another time in your life when you can sit down to start writing the stories that you had always been saying you want to write and put in a book. And I thought, oh, she's right. All right. And I started writing the book then, 2018. And I started putting together the stories that I had in different journals, and it started becoming a manuscript. That once I became employed and started fundraising for my salary at Ministerio Latino, I put to the side, but then I will come back to it, and free periods. And then finally, 3 or 4 years ago, I met in one of my travels to El Salvador an anthropologist. Also, he's a professor at a university, and I said, hey, would you review this material I have, and would you help me edit it? And And then became the work of like another year and a half of standing pieces. He would say, write more about this, oh, this and the other, and then I started, and that's how it happened. It happened through all these years with the, poking of my wife to take advantage of that time when I was in transition between jobs and that, and so forever, the book is dedicated to her, because I'm forever thankful for, that push. Yeah.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, in the book, you tell so many amazing, powerful, hard stories about your family and just their influence on you. I think about your grandparents, your parents, your Tia Maria, and just curious if, in case there are folks who haven't had a chance yet to read, if you could just touch briefly on just their impact on you for early years, but then I think especially for today, how do you still carry them with you today?
Yeah, my Tia Maria, who is 87, she's the matriarch of the family. And I was telling people at dinner, she is Trump's worst nightmare. She's the person who came first in 1976 and started bringing all the relatives. And you next, and you next. And then she will go down to El Salvador and people would say, oh, I'm having a hard time, will you help me go? And she will bring neighbors. And she's just amazing and giving and generous. And so she never had kids of her own, so she just like took us all under her wing, and my mom, and helped raise us. And so when you grow up with people who is always embracing others and helping out and giving, you have to be somebody who believes in that kind of solidarity, because you live it, and you were a beneficiary of it. Yeah, yes. And then with my grandma, she was my first caretaker, because my mom had to work long hours as a nurse. And grandma was a devout Catholic, was always praying the rosary. And so with her, it was this idea, this prevalent idea of God and God watching us. Of course, my idea of God has become more UCC, more loving, which I'm very thankful for, but it's imprinted too, and then with one of my grandparents, who happened to be one of the founding members of the Communist Party in El Salvador, I learned all these stories about how his nickname in those meetings was Commander Son, El Comandante Sol. And, and then my brother got named Stalin after Joseph Stalin, because my father grew up hearing, long life Stalin, long life Lenin. So he ended up naming my brother Stalin. So all of these characters just made a great mix of, people to bring.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Sorry, we're having a little adjustment with my mic. You can turn it down just a little bit. Okay, great, thank you. Mm-hmm. I love how you talk about, Tia Maria being Trump's worst nightmare and bringing people forward. And you talk powerfully about your own journey immigrating to the U.S. And in the 80s, you talk about how she came ahead and helped bring others. Your mother came, then you came. And you talk about the journey of crossing the border, not once, but twice. Having to entrust yourself to coyotes, having then to rebuild your life.
I would like to read that part.
Yeah, please, please. That would be wonderful.
Because I think it's very timely. So I have it right here. And it's titled, because we were called this all the time, Little Wetbacks, but worthy. And just for I wrote another story that is not in the book. And like, if we were to call something, because we never crossed a river, we needed it to be called wet toes, because I remember just crossing a stream. I never with my back, but anyway. So we left as if on an excursion that was going to last a whole month. We traveled in the company of a group of 20 individuals. I remember that one family had children very excited at the idea that they were going to go to Disneyland, but their parents hushed them constantly because they didn't want it to be known that we were going to cross into the US illegally. When we got to Tijuana, all of us together were put in a safe house. The smuggler, the coyote, who had transported us from El Salvador, said that he was going to go and wash our clothes since we couldn't go out. The minute he left, the Mexican federal police, the federales, descended upon us and arrested us. It is kind of ironic that at the very moment we had been practicing singing the Mexican national anthem, we had to pass as Mexicans while we were in Mexican territory. The police brought us to a cell that had one tiny window that looked onto the street. I remember feeling despair, having been locked up in a dark, dirty cell, able only to look outside through the tiny window, wanting badly to be set free. After threatening to return us to our home country, the federales told us that if we paid them, they themselves would pass us on to another group of coyotes. And that is how we got ourselves released. The other smugglers were Mexicans. They threatened us too. Every other minute they were warning us not to try to escape because they were being sought out on both sides of the border for having killed people. They held us in a room with mattresses on the floor, and it was a very dreadful thing being there. Like, we felt like animals. On our first attempt to cross the border, I suffered the biggest cold of my life, to the point that my teeth were chattering. The coyotes ordered us to lie down on the grassy ground. They kept a lookout, waiting for the moment that the Gringo Border Patrol withdrew, so we could attempt a crossing. While we were lying on our stomachs, the wet, frozen ground penetrated my body to the bone. I peed in my pants. I was shivering with the ice cold. Never in my life had I felt anything like it. Well, perhaps I have, when discrimination feels as piercing cold past bearing. When we finally crossed, we made our way in silence over mountains, down sidewalks. We had been walking several hours when the smugglers shouted for us to hide. Now we have the border patrol on top of us. In a matter of seconds, a helicopter appeared. They call it El Mosco, the mosquito, shining down bright light on the entire area as if it was daytime. The Gringo police ordered us to come out of hiding one by one. I was holed up under a bush with my aunt. My brother had climbed a tree, but says that when he saw us, he had to calm down and hang himself over. Stalin was irritated with us because we hadn't hidden well enough. The US immigration agents began interrogating us. We told them that we were Mexicans. In those days, more than 40 years ago, they didn't know how to distinguish between different groups of immigrants. We were all put in a van to spend the night. They didn't give us any water or let us use the bathroom. I remember that a lady in a group vomited during that inhumane imprisonment in the van. It was strange to be there. I felt like I was out of my body. It seemed as if I was looking down from above on everything that was happening, as if it was a movie. The following day, they threw us out back to the other side of the border of Tijuana. That's when my Aunt Maria rolled up her sleeves. Off she went to look for another way for us to cross the border again. She sent to my mother in New York asking for more money and negotiated our transfer jet to another group of smugglers. I don't know what she did, but she did something. I believe that first she had to pay the ones we were, then they let us go. And then she had to entrust our lives to the new ones. While she was conferring with the gangsters who were holding us, I was really afraid, worried that if something happened to her, we will no longer have anyone to protect us. Having been transferred to the third group of smugglers, that same night, we repeated our attempt to cross the border. We were walking along the highway when the Mexican Federal Police intersected us again. Once more, they took us to the station, and again, we had to pay them in order for them to release us. The Federals themselves led us to a sewage outflow culvert that opened right at the foot of the chain link fence that ran along the border. The boundary that we crossed more than 40 years ago doesn't look anything like the concrete wall that you see today. We walked for what it seemed a half an hour. They gestured us to lie down on the grass near the highway. Shortly thereafter, some cars appeared. We were told to get in, and in a few minutes, we were in San Diego. We disembarked at the safe house for immigrants who had recently crossed. And there was my end waiting for us, that last leg of the journey my brother and I had made along. Inside at the safe house, my aunt had lit a candle, and together she and I went to give thanks to God. Later, she cooked me an egg with Kraft Yellow American cheese, and that was the first thing I ate in the United States of America.
Wow. Let's just sit with that for a minute as you hear that story. I'm just so curious if you could just share a little bit more about how you continue to hold that story in you, how that story, and not story for you, your lived experience, how does that continue to just impact you today and your ministry today?
Mm-hmm. So it's a way to empathize because I know how hard it is, and I know that when we left El Salvador, it wasn't because we wanted it to come. It was the war years in El Salvador. It was in the 1980s. And whoever was able to escape the war was doing it, and it was a matter of saving your life. So for me, it's so important to keep those stories current, because often you hear that people, they call it the invasion of immigrants. Like, people are dying to come here. Of course, people are dying to come here for a better life, but it's so hard to leave your country. It's not easy. Even at 14, I just remember how homesick I was for a long time, because the life I had in El Salvador probably wasn't luxurious, but it was a good life, a life that gave me identity, a life that gave me belonging. So for me, it's so important to keep this alive, because then I understand it will give me always the motivation to fight for the immigrant community, and it's what I want to dedicate my life to do, opening those spaces, providing places where people feel their dignity, their value. Yeah.
Well, and I appreciate you just sharing so much of your firsthand experience. And I know it was 40 years ago, and I worked for a year on the U.S.-Mexico border as a high school teacher, and my 10th graders, there were several of them had stories similar to yours about having to come across the border, being smuggled across the border. And I'm curious if from friends and family today, from parishioners, just from what you know about how that your experience compares to people also trying to come across the border today.
Yes, so I had the opportunity to do a virtual reading with a house cleaning cooperative in San Francisco. It was 70 women immigrant women, and I did a reading with them. It was so, they were so engaged because they were like, immediately with this story, with, yes, I remember the Moscow. Oh, it's the way you say it there. Yes, it light up the entire area. And they could relate with it. And it was so important for them to hear that, somebody saying the stories that belong to all of us.
Yes.
That we shared that, and then somebody says, yes, and I did it 5 times until I finally made it happen.
Well, it speaks to the persistence and the resilience and the courage.
Yeah.
And I'm curious too, in reading the book, you talk about there's certainly the borders of geography that you're crossing in country, but there are other borders that you're crossing in your life as you come out, and the borders of sexual orientation, as you challenge the borders of faith, from Catholicism to your evangelical Baptist years to now being part of the UCC. You have the borders of vocation, a lawyer to community organizer to pastor, and they're not distinct. Obviously, these things all overlap, but I'm just curious about all these border crossings and sort of how they how they inform you and how they really inform the ministry that you're doing today.
You can say I became addicted to crossing all these borders. But this is, I think, very human. This is a very human experience because many of us want to grow into something else, want to have these changes through our lives, I know I'm not the only person that, has gone through 1 or 2 careers. And so I think that's part of just like humanity, our own humanity, always searching and being curious and staying learning. And, that was what makes you alive. And I think the hardest, border to cross was accepting myself a lesbian and accepting myself a Christian. Because, I used to belong to a Baptist church that was super fundamentalist. You didn't dance, you didn't drink, you didn't have any fun.
Right.
You went to prayer service, you went to Bible school, you testify on Fridays, but it was very limited. The world was very narrow, and for me, it was agonizing to think that I was going to change that. That was my world, because that had been the church that had welcomed me as an immigrant. It was a church of immigrants, of Salvadorians, who were coming there during the 80s, and it was all I knew. And so, to me, that the breaking through that was totally forgetting, who I was, and then starting life at 26, rediscovering myself as a queer woman. Yeah, I remember that, I had never gone to a club and I didn't know how to dance, and somebody said, they said, this is what you do. This is the one step you need to know. Just pretend you are in a packed bus, and then that you're trying to get out, and you go, excuse me. And then you got it down. And that was my first step.
Terrific. All right.
Because I didn't know how to dance.
Oh, I love it. That's great. So, and then tell us a little bit more about Ministerio Latino and the community you're serving now.
Sure. So Ministerio Latino started in my apartment. That's where we started meeting, December 2011, 4 months before I became ordained. And then we grew, and our mother church gave us a space, and that's when we meet now. And for this past 15 years, it has welcomed many newcomers. And at the beginning, it was interesting because, the intention was it was going to be a very welcoming, LGBTQ welcoming congregation, but I was only getting divorcees, straight divorcees. And my wife would say, well, I don't think you're living up to the mission. I'm like, well, do they want to come? Maybe it was the church of the broken hearts. But soon we started, the word went out, and now we have the full spectrum of the LGBT community and also straight allies who come. In 2018, when I started fundraising for it, it was so good because I started asking for grants that hadn't been asked before by churches. And one of the first grants I got for in 2020, when we went shelter in place and many people lost their jobs, we got a grant for rapid response, and we immediately started giving people money for rent, for food, and we immediately started being a lifeline for the community. And most of the people who was helped was a trans community, Latino trans community, and others, but majority. And so that has made a statement, that has created presence. And because we are very careful that when we give a donation, we tell people, you don't have to come to our services. This is a donation, you need it, so that they don't feel that they owe us anything. And so it's been very vital for the community, and then also having the opportunity to baptize trans siblings into their gender expression, their new names, providing that for people, providing the sacraments and making it accessible and in their language, with all the cultural components of it. So, yeah, a very unique space during the pandemic. One of the things that happened is that people found us in the internet, and then we had people connecting from all over the U.S. and Latin America. Mm-hmm. So now our Bible study that we keep online is coordinated between an open and affirming community in El Salvador and us.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
wow, yeah, that's powerful. Yeah. Well, and I'm curious, many of us here are part of open and affirming churches here. We're part of immigrant welcoming churches here. But we're not, for some of us, like us and like Oswego, not in the heart of where the deepest need is. And so we're partnering with a lot of other organizations and working together. And so I'm just curious if you can speak, again, coming out of your own perspective, coming out of your local church hat, and also with your associate conference minister hat on, about what can churches like ours and those of us gathered here, are there ways that we could be more deeply living into what it means to be immigrant welcoming, what it means to be open and affirming in these particular times?
Yeah. So I think partnerships are a great way of doing the work that we can probably not, if we are not in the middle of the community, partnerships are definitely something we need to be doing. to have the tentacles to be able to do that. And also identifying leadership within the community to, they might be wanting a faith community. You know, I was lucky to have Plymouth behind me, not just for my ordination, but believing that this congregation could have vitality, could be formed, and they are now my fiscal sponsor. And just to have that alone, the fiscal sponsor administrative piece, makes it possible for me to get grants. So that type of partnership and trust that can be created through relationship building, I think is important in creating the spaces for leadership that that looks like the community you want to serve.
Yeah, thank you. And then I know we're going to get to, I want to get questions from everybody too, but just one more for now, and that is just kind of as, again, we're living in these really difficult times with Trump in office and the uptick of ICE and just everything that's happening. And I'm curious, just for you, where are you seeing hope? Where are you seeing, I don't know, the signs of resilience in the community and among, again, with all your different hats on? What's giving you hope in these times?
Yeah, I definitely, United Church of Christ progressive theology is very helpful for me, because our churches have like really put themselves to work. I haven't visited, you know, part of my work as an associate minister is to visit churches. All the churches are working into something. The churches I visited here, they all invested in so that gives me hope, definitely. But I do have moments when it becomes heavy and overwhelming. Some of my congregants are waiting for their asylum hearings, and they are terrified because what's going to happen to them when they show up in court, the asylum gets denied, are they going to be deported right there and then? I have a person who works with me, who's one of my most active, he's a gay man from Mexico who is a psychologist. And he says, if they take me, there is a bag in my room that only you can take. I'm like, oh, no, don't tell me that. You know, it's just heavy to think that the people that I'm with are so much at risk. And so there are moments when I feel really sad, overwhelmed, dark. I don't feel that I'm doing enough. And in those moments, I have to look for telenovelas. And line up, you know, look for poetry. I had to look for lightness and absurdity and something that just makes it possible for me to continue. I was lucky enough to be in Colombia just recently, and I was 2 weeks in Colombia. And just being detached from being in the United States, being in Latin America, really gave me a lot of inspiration, because there is a world out there. There's a world out there that doesn't believe that what's happening here is right. And yeah, and there are people that are very proud of who they are in their identity, and don't buy that anything that, you know, that Latin America only holds as the rhetoric says, thieves and narco. No, there's writers, there's historians, there is people with so much to give and enrich life. And so I lead a delegation to El Salvador every year. I'm going to be leading that in November. And that's part of me keeping hope alive, because every time I go, we meet with activists doing LGBTQ work in El Salvador, doing environmental justice in El Salvador, doing feminist work, disability rights. And if you can fight in conditions like the ones El Salvador has, extreme poverty, repression, because they're having repression these days, Our president is very good friends with Trump, is allowing people to be deported to El Salvador. If you can have hope in those conditions, you can have it in other more privileged conditions. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And speaking of people who exude hope and share stories, which I hear and see you doing tonight, what's next for you? Rumor has it you might be working on another book.
Rumor. I would love to, but that was the study. The study leave I took was to brainstorm, and the brainstorming is taking me into something between the tension between doubts and faith. Doubts and faith, and just as narratives, because it's come to me in stories and things I see. For instance, I like celebrating the Feast of La Guadalupe on December the 12th, the Virgin of Mexico, La Guadalupana. And I like going early in the morning when they sing, the mariachis sing to the Virgin in the morning. And I was in church this past December, and there was somebody who was coming, walking on her knees from the front of the church to the altar, and she was just set in the Virgin, just looking up. And, I just started like writing, like, what could be in her heart? What was her petition? Was her petition to, get somebody released from the detention center? What was it? And so stories like that I'm writing down. Maybe another 6 years, we'll see what happens.
Wonderful. Well,
Yes.
let's hear from some of you. Mina will get one of our microphones, and if you have a question for Rhina or something you want to ask from either what she shared tonight or what you've read in her book, we'd love to hear from you.
Hello again. I am curious about your own theological journey and what prompted you to get into the ministry and go to seminary and that whole portion of your life.
Oh, yeah. So, as I mentioned, I was a fundamentalist Baptist, and that happened because I negotiated with God in one of the moments of crossing the border. It got so dangerous that I kneeled down in a patio and I said, okay, God, you help us cross the border safely, and I'll become a good Catholic again. I will go to confession, I will go to Mass, and I will do this. And I was ready to comply with my promise once we arrived in Long Island, New York. And I went to Mass, I went to talk to a priest, and I said, I have so many questions, why there are so many religions in the world? And he says, well, all you have to do is come to Mass, and your answers will be answering Mass. And I was like, oh, I was ready. And then as fate had it, we moved to an apartment complex next to a Baptist church, and one day I spotted my bilingual teacher going in, and I'm like, how am I going to ask her what happens there? And she said, come in, it's Sunday, 3 p.m. I went into that church, and I didn't leave for 10 years until I came out to start dancing. And so I became an attorney. I was practicing labor law. I felt burned out after 5 years of practicing law on behalf of immigrant workers who were exploited. I couldn't hear more cases of exploitation. And I was considering going back to school, but I wasn't sure what. And so my mentor, who happened to be atheist Jewish, said, well, faith has always been important to you. Why don't consider going to theology? And I thought, oh, wow, maybe. And I went and sat at a class at Union Theological Seminary. They were talking about the idea of God changing after World War II. I was so fascinated by what they were discussing in the class. I was like, wow. If I'm going to spend money and energy to go back to school, it had to be on something that makes me feel like this. So that's how I decided for seminary. And then a job brought me to California, and I decided to postpone starting seminary at Union. And I applied to the Pacific School of Religion, and I got full tuition, and I was like, I'm not moving, I'm staying, of course I'm staying. And I went through seminary just as craving, you know, learning and feeling restored from practicing law, but no considering the path of ordination. And because I thought pastors at the time, I thought pastors were these perfect people, you know, like they never sway from their faith, and you know. And I was like, I would look at myself and like, no, I'm not that. And so I left seminary, finished my degree in 2003, and it wasn't until 5 years later that I started considering ministry, because I was doing nonprofit work, and I was doing domestic prevention work. I was training promotores, community health workers to do that in schools and churches. And my boss used to say, it's weird, but you run your meetings like you are in church. They hold hands, they sing. And I was like, oh my God, it might be something there. Maybe this is the only way I know how to do community organizing. And so I started considering, and I had never set foot in a United Church of Christ church, and somebody said, go to that church, it's very multicultural. Because all my worship has always been in Spanish, and so I went, I started attending, and then the pastors in that church said, I think you should be in the path to ordination, and they put me in the track. I had to come back to school to finish UCC polity, UCC history, and it took other, you know, until 2012 when I became ordained. So that it happened with all these detours. Yeah, and I'm glad it did, because the day of ordination, I remember going into the church with my two pastors holding my hand, and I felt like a kid. I could swing, you know. I was so happy, so happy.
That's great.
So kind of taking off from there, you know, when you were being ordained and you said, you know, you never thought you'd be a pastor, let alone here you are, a pastor who identifies as lesbian, and you were administering your first communion, and you felt like it was full, so you were coming full circle.
Yeah.
So if you could talk a little bit more, expand upon that, and what that felt like and what that full circle was for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it just was so incredible to be in front of the communion table. And I did it in Espanol because it's the language of my heart. And I remember when I was probably 6, I was getting ready to do my first communion. And I remember when they will, in Catholic Mass, they ring the bells when they doing consecration. And I remember that when they will do that, I would pray, God, you coming into the elements, come into my heart. And I just remember being little, but being this mystic, weird kid that, that understood this spirituality. So doing this was incredible and magical. Yeah. It's just like when you understand, okay, you came to the world to do something, and then you find a something, and I'm one of those lucky people that know, this is what it is. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for sharing your stories. It's an inspirational testimony. It's a testimony of faith. And I'm curious about being vulnerable about parts of your story that are hard as a
yeah.
pastor, and kind of that role, like you said, like there's this idea that pastors are supposed to be perfect, which we know is not true, but there's still kind of these ideas that it's this kind of elevated office. And I came to faith in prison, and I am in the process of writing a memoir and also in a process of ordination, and sometimes I've thought that those are in conflict. So I wonder if you could talk about if you ever felt that conflict or that tension and kind of how you navigated it.
Yeah, the vulnerability part was scary. It was scary. I think the part that felt very challenging at moments was like how exposed my mom was going to be. Because she, to me, she's the most important woman in my life, and I didn't want her to feel judged in the parts where she was neglectful because she was just working all the time, you know. And so that to me was like, I think, hard. I remember not giving the book to her for a long time until she said, okay, when I'm getting my copy. And I gave it to her, and she said, called me the next day, she said, I read it, I need a therapist. And she started seeing one. But at the same time, it was like, if I write these stories, I cannot hold back, because then it will not be, if I start hiding or even parts of it, it will not be true that is my heart. It would not be true. And so, but I did work. I have to say, you know, I was lucky, my wife again saying, okay, you're going to go back to therapy now that you're working on this book, and before it gets published, you need to be ready. People are going to be mad at you, or you know, there's going to be moments when you're going to need support. And so I went back to therapy, and I'm lucky also enough to be working for the past 3 years with a personal trainer. Because part of my, I think, journey of healing is to possess and embody my body. It was so many times by religion, it was so denied to me that I needed to learn how to. And so with a personal trainer, I've been able to feel more comfortable lifting weights, and just feeling stronger. And so it has required certain I haven't done it alone. The answer is that it happened because I had a lot of support.
Have you read the book Solito?
Yes, one of my favorites.
Well, we heard him speak here to a full audience at the Schnitzer, and he talked about every bad thing that he experienced was like another injury to his body. And after you get so many of those layered, it's very hard to survive and get rid of them. Mm-hmm. How have you done that? Because you seem to have such a good frame of mind and good humor, but has it been real hard?
It's been really hard. It's been really hard, and it's a long life process. It will always be with me, and I will always need support, and I will always need pan dulce, dessert. When life gets bad, there's always cake. I have my vices, and those are my vices.
Just tagging on to the question that was just asked about of where you get your strength, from, and I love to hear that you are acknowledging and giving grace to your body for what it is. But your mental state, like you are so confident. Have you always been this confident? Is that a part of your personality? Did
I
it
could
come?
have a good front.
Oh, okay.
You should have seen me at dinner. I was like nervous. No, as an immigrant in this country, confidence is something that comes after you accomplish a lot of things that make you feel valid, because a lot of the time was trying to win that validation, was winning, even being able to enunciate, to take my time to say the words so that people understood me. Even that was another border to cross. For many years, I was so terrified speaking English, because in high school in Hampstead, we had teachers that would make fun of our accent. There were people so stupid that will do that to a young person. And so I was terrified. I didn't want to be ridiculized. So, I'm glad that I come across confident now. I'm glad that at 57, that's what I'm doing. But it's the fact that at this point of my life, I have lived through a war. I have crossed a border. I don't give a damn what some people might think. I have, but most importantly, I have community and network of support that has my back. That has my back. That to me is the most important thing. That community that I know will protect me, be there for me. Yeah, but thank you.
Let's do one more in the back.
Yeah, hi. I'm from Honduras. So.
Vecina!
But I think one question that I have is I have two questions. One is, why did you choose to write a book? What was in you that you decided to start writing? And then two is, what is one thing that you would want for people to take away after reading your book?
I will start with the second one. I want people to read the book so that if they are immigrants, they can hear their stories, they can hear their voice, they can give themselves permission to be visible. Because we are being told we need to hide. And so for me, it's that. And for allies, it's for them to see the humanity of the immigrant community, to learn of the complexities, to relate and just humanize us. No any different from any other human being. With the other question, I will read something and I will tell you. I think I had it write it in me since I was little, and I will tell you why. Plus, I wanted it to end with this story. My grandmother, Mama Rosa, strove to become an angel when she died. I was finally able to write my first story, free at last from her stalking eyes. When I was 10 years old, I wanted to begin keeping a diary, but Mama Rosa would not allow it. Her eyes followed me wherever I went. Every time I snatched my notebook and a pencil to start writing about the things that were going around me. All I wanted to do was to write about people I saw, the sunrises, the volcano loom in front of me when the door was open from inside the place where I grew up in El Salvador. Mama Rosa was intensely aware of my every movement, just as it was the ever-present eye of God. She used to tell me that there was an eye that tracked us through the day. It was the ojo de Dios and could see everything we did. I imagine an enormous eyeball hanging from the ceiling. Mama Rosa also had convinced me that I had to eat everything on my plate because my guardian angel was keeping an eye on me. He would get sad if I didn't finish all my food. That's all why I ate up all those plates loaded with food the abuelita, as we call her, put in front of me. That damn guardian angel, he never got fat, but I did. At the age of 10, I was already an obese child, and I would eat 10 tortillas with a whole sardine just to keep the angel happy. My grandmother's gaze was penetrating, just like that of my Uncle Mere, who could put scorpions to sleep. Behind the thick lenses of her glasses, her eyes could reach the corners where I hid in order to play or write. I remember that I kept my diary on my person for a whole week so that she couldn't read it. But eventually, I got tired of hiding it. One fine day, I went into the bathroom, tore out the pages of the notebook one by one, and threw them down the toilet. I disappeared the evidence that thoughts captured on paper possess the power to make someone shake in their boots. The words can form images in the mind of those who can bring them to life. Doubtless, Mama Rosa was afraid of my thoughts. She imagined, because she said it to me repeatedly, that my head was full of lustful and sinful images. Lust and sin were among the first words I learned as a little kid, thanks to the fact that Mama Rosa accused me at every turn of being in the act of doing something of that sort. In my childhood, I learned that women are possessed of a sinful nature because, according to my grandmother, women led others to sin. Women are guilty of the original sin, since Eve gave Adam the apple, and that's where everything got screwed up. Mama Rosa accused me of having turned the photograph of the Pope that she jealously guarded in her wardrobe. I swear that I didn't do it. The photo already had a tiny tear on one corner, but her eyes, I was responsible for everything that went wrong. If I defended myself, she refused to believe me. So it was easier just to let her think that I was capable of any weak deed. She believed I was an evil girl. No, now that I'm an adult, it seems incredible to me that she could have thought that because I was the granddaughter. Now that I'm an adult, seems incredible to me that she could have thought that, because I was the granddaughter who most observed her teachings about good and evil, about God and the devil, about heaven and hell. When I was about 6 years old, I remember I heard a group of older boys criticizing the Catholic Church. They were behind our apartment discussing why they wouldn't confess to a Catholic priest. Bottom line, they were saying a priest is just a human being like so anyone else. I was shocked by what they were saying, and I ran to where my grandmother was doing chores and told her, Mama Rosa, there are some boys out there who don't believe in God. Mama Rosa grabbed a wash basin full of water and threw it to them through the window and said, heretics, beat it up, you heretics. The Inquisition had its messenger in the middle of the 20th century, my grandmother Rosa, and I was her assistant. Together we persecuted heretics and applied punishment by water to those who dare question the priest. In addition to the torn photo of the Pope in my grandmother's wardrobe, there were a bunch of saints, relics, virgins, and crucifixes. These symbols were companions to the mornings, noon, and night, invoking them non-stop. She used to pray, Holy Mother of God, pray of us sinners now and in the hour of our death. I believe in God and the Father Almighty, in the resurrection of body and the life everlasting. Amen. When Mama Rosa would open the doors of her wardrobe, there appeared the martyrs of the Christian faith. There was a certain Saint Sebastian stuck all over with arrows and dying in pain. There was a Saint Martin de Porres, a black saint who had been enslaved and carried a broom. And he had acquired his sainthood in return for suffering the humiliations by white Spanish priests. The saint who really terrified me was El Holy Niño de Atocha. That saint was a dwarf dressed like a colonial pilgrim with a floor-length black robe, wearing a black Quaker hat with red lips, pasty skin, and black curls that hang down on both sides from the hat. In the two upper corners of his icon were scenes in which miracles were being performed through his divine intervention. In one of the scenes, the child of Atocha was shown saving a woman who was being stabbed to death. In the other image was a sick man on his bed being healed by the child. This sign always scared me because he looked like a child ghost. I wouldn't have called upon him to save me for anything in the world. These were the witnesses before whom my grandmother petitioned heaven, begging to make her an angel. Was that why her full name was Rosenda Ángela Majano Correas? Perhaps she thought that by fervently appealing to them, she could be rid of carnal thoughts with which she was tormented her whole life. Abuela believed that the flesh was sinful, that the whole body could do nothing but evil. Mama Rosa didn't want to feel the sensations of her body, so she lashed herself when she prayed the rosary. Once I saw her flagellating herself with an inner tube of a bicycle called tire. She was thrashing her back as she recited her prayers. She struggled with guilt. She always fought the guilt she fell over and the fact that she was a sinful woman. Surely it had to have been because of her sexual fantasies that drove her to chant endlessly her long litanies. Tower of Ivory, pray for us. Star of the morning, pray for us. And sometimes she even prayed these litanies in Latin, which was exceedingly strange because at that point she couldn't neither read or write. She only learned to read around the age of 50, and from then on, never read another book but the Bible. The Catholic Church and unceasing prayer were the two most important things to her. A day didn't pass on which she didn't light her candles in preparation for praying her interminable rosaries. Mama Rosa usually prayed too for the main characters of the soap operas to be happy. She loved watching telenovelas in the way I do. When Mama Rosa saw the actors on the shows crying and suffering, she worried terribly and prayed her rosaries even more intensely. Abuela was quite surprised when these actors would reappear in the role of a new character on another telenovela, but she was glad to see them again. And you might say that she was really responsible for the repeated incarnations of these divas, Mexican divas, Veronica Castro and Lucia Mendez. They tell me that my grandmother feared and perhaps appetite for sex began when a man took her at the age of 17 up to a mountain to make her a woman. In El Salvador, a girl doesn't become a woman until a man takes her, as if she was livestock that must be branded. Mama Rosa had been an orphan at age 6, and to survive, she began serving in the homes of wealthy people in her town. She told me that she was so little when she started working as a servant. Her employers had to stack bricks for her to stand down so she could reach the sink. Abuela had no one to protect her when she was growing up. It's easy to imagine someone would take her by force. She went without many things during her childhood. She had no education, no food, no even a secure place to live. That experience made her vigilant that nothing edible was ever thrown in the trash. When it came to leftovers, she used to say, better it should cause harm than it should be wasted. Mama Rosa married my grandfather, Alfonso, with whom she lived in sin, as she used to say, for more than 50 years. Abuelos had been wed before, so the priest would not let them marry in the church. Perhaps that's why Abuela had to spend so many afternoons in prayer, why she had to pray in public in front of the building where we lived in El Salvador. Our neighbors thought that Mama Rosa was crazy. What those others didn't know was that my grandmother was desperate to become an angel, or at least to stop being a woman. Yeah. So I wanted it to write since I was very little, but I had a vigilant abuela. So it came until now. But she had to also be her legend, her story is good that it's there. It makes her eternal.
Oh.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you very
so
much.
much for
Thank
this
you.
night and for stories. And I know we're going to hear from Tyler. And
Oh, okay, thank you. There was a comment online that was just a reminder to people about how May 1st is going to be the May Day, a day without immigrants and fasting. We can talk about that more when we're doing our coffee or drinks or whatever. And we have pan dulce.
So life is good.
so Tyler, yeah, we'll turn it over to our general minister and president. Come on up.
Oh. So before we close, I just wanted to say and for those of you who don't know me, I'm the Reverend Tyler Connolly. I'm the conference minister. I use they, them pronouns. And so when we said to Pastor Rhina, what sort of honorarium would you like to be able to come and speak? And she said, well, you could give me an honorarium, but I'm just going to give it to my church. And so we're taking an offering for Ministerio Latino. And there's an offering plate in the back. If you would like to give cash, it will go with Rhina to Ministerio Latino. If you would like to give by check, you can make the check out to Ministerio Latino, which is spelled like minister, I-O, ministerio, and then Latino, Latin, O. So Ministerio Latino. Or you can go to ministeriolatino.org and give directly on the website for the church. And just because I already did, you go down to the very bottom of the page and click on donate, and then it will take you to Plymouth Church's website, but it says Ministerio Latino in the where it's going, so that you know you're at the right place. So, and then the one other thing that we would like to do, and I asked Rhina about this beforehand, is that I would like, Rhina, if you would come up here and...
I'm destroying this.
So that's fine.
That's okay.
Yeah. You can take it off now. Does she need to speak again? Or?
No.
Okay.
And maybe Pastor Jenny will have you also come up here.
Sure.
And I asked if I could lay hands on Rhina and pray. And Jenny, maybe you can lay hands. Is that okay, Rhina? And then the rest of you, if you would just put your hands up, and we'll pray for Pastor Rhina. Amado Dios, beloved God, thank you for your beloved Rhina. God, we cannot thank you for all of the things that have happened to her in her life, but we thank you for all of the journeys that you have taken with her, for the fact that you have been with her on every one of these detours. We thank you, God, for the people who have come alongside and gone before, especially for Tia Maria. And God, we thank you for the ministry of Ministerio Latino and for bringing this calling to your beloved Rhina. We pray that you will bless her work, that you will bless her ministry, that you will bless the people who come to her church and find strength and find courage and find blessing there. We thank you for the ways that our paths have now come together and will go forward together. Thank you, God, for this night and for Rhina and for Ministerio Latino. We ask this all in your holy name. Amado Dios, beloved God. Amen.
Thank you.
Well, I think we will move to our reception now, which is just out these doors to the left to come. If you have a book, you can bring it. Rhina would be happy to sign it. And we also have some Spanish copies of the book that Pastor Rhina brought with her as well. So if you're interested in that, you can purchase one as well. So thank you all for being here tonight.